All right, as promised, we got a little bonus video here on a Friday afternoon. So this is not like immediately from the play, but when we get to the end of the balcony scene here, we have now reached the end of the first day of the play in the time of the play. Okay, we've been reading for several weeks now, but as we have read, it's important to note that a lot has happened. And sometimes when we've been reading this and a lot has happened, sometimes it's easy for us to lose perspective of how quickly things are actually happening in the play. So I just wanted to make this video to go over the timeline so far and refresh us on these events before we start the next day of the story on Monday. So here we go, day one timeline. Our first event in the play happens about, about 5:30 a.m. Okay. And we don't actually see it happening, but we hear about it. And this is Romeo crying in the grove of sycamores, right? He's crying, he's sad about the fact that Rosaline doesn't like him back. Benvolio sees him and is like, hey, and Romeo's like, no, okay? So 5:30 a.m., Romeo's crying in the grove of sycamores. Then we jump forward a couple hours, and we've got Samson and Gregory. You remember those two servants. And that goes into I bite my thumb at you, or no, not I bite my thumb at you. It goes through, do you bite your thumb at us? All that good stuff, right? And then very quickly, that turns into the fight in the streets of Verona between the Montagues and the Capulets. Bring me my longsword, ho. Prince Aeschylus comes and yells to break it all up, etc. 9:00 a.m. That is where Benvolio tries to find out why Romeo is so sad, right? Romeo asks, what time is it? And Benvolio says, but news struck 9. Romeo says, ay me, sad hours seem long. What sadness lengthens Romeo's hours, etc. So because Benvolio tells Romeo it's 9 a.m., that anchors a lot of the other events in this day of the play, because we have an official time actually stated there, okay? Then, excuse me, after their conversation, the camera cuts to a different location. Let's call it 10:00 a.m. We're in the Capulet Mansion. And this is where we have Paris asking Lord Capulet to marry Juliet. Let's rephrase that, if he can marry Juliet, right? And Lord Capulet says, my daughter is but a stranger in the world. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride ere we may find her ripe to be a bride. An hour later, so that's a fairly short conversation. And then Peter comes in, right? We got a problem though. Peter can't read. So around 11 a.m., Peter can't read, and he asks Romeo, Benvolio, Mercutio for help. No, Mercutio's not in that scene. Yes, Romeo and Benvolio for help. Romeo reads the letter, and then Peter invites them to the party. If you not be of the house of Montague, come and crush a cup of wine. That is to how you spell Benvolio. I'm going to, Benvolio. Oh, I did spell it wrong. Anyway, whatever. So then we've got another jump ahead in time, and we're going to call it 6:30 p.m. Side note, as I'm doing this, if you find something like scholarly that explains that the times are off, I acknowledge the times might be off, but these are going to be close enough for our purposes. So roughly 6:30 p.m. This is the scene with the nurse, Lady Capulet, and Juliet talking about Paris. It doesn't start out that way. It starts out with the nurse telling her stories about Juliet as a young girl, tells the same story 4 times, etc. But then Lady Capulet says, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love. Can you like the gentleman? Juliet says, I'll look to like if looking liking move. And then the servant rushes in and says, hey, the party's starting. Everybody wants you downstairs. Okay. So they go off to the beginning of the party, and then we jump ahead in time just a little bit more. Let's call it 8 o'clock p.m. And this is where we officially meet Mercutio. This is the Queen Mab speech on the way to the party. Okay. I dreamt a dream tonight. So did I. What was yours? The dreamers often lie in bed asleep as they dream things true. Ah, then I see Queen Mab hath been with you. Mercutio trying to convince Romeo. Not much later, Romeo, Mercutio, Benvolio, etc. enter the party and are greeted by Lord Capulet. Okay. Remember, Benvolio was worried that supper would be over by the time they got there. And then at the very beginning of the party scene, it actually starts out with the servants, that short scene where they're like rushing to clean up after the dinner and to get the dance floor all ready and whatever. Okay. So they're there for a bit, they dance, they have fun. And then around 9:15 p.m., Romeo and Juliet actually meet for the first time. They flirt, they kiss. I was about to say they get to know each other, but they don't really. But they meet and flirt and kiss. They fall in love at first sight. And while Romeo and Juliet are having that conversation, Benvolio, or not long after that conversation is when Benvolio says, hey, we got to go. Okay. So 10 o'clock, party ends. They leave. Lord Capulet says, stay, we're having an after party. And then somebody whispers in his ear and he says, never mind, have a good night. Okay. So the party ends. And then that is the end of Act 1. Okay. However, even though Act 1 ends, the day still continues. So at the beginning of Act 2, we're at like 10:30 p.m. roughly. And that's Benvolio and Mercutio looking for Romeo outside the Capulet Mansion. And then not much further after that, let's call it 11 o'clock p.m. is the balcony scene with Romeo and Juliet, which we just finished reading today. So we look at this, 5:30 a.m., the play begins. Romeo's crying in the Grove of Sycamores because he is so desperately in love with Rosaline. But then by the end of the night, we have the balcony scene, Romeo trying to swear his eternal love to Juliet. And that is where day 1 ends. Day 2 begins with Act 2, Scene 3, and that's where we meet Friar Lawrence. And the beginning of that scene is early the next morning. A lot has happened, but it's only been one day, one very busy day. So I hope that recap is helpful to you as we continue the play. I think it's good to see those timelines and think about what's actually happening when. I hope this is helpful to you. Make it a great day. Talk to you soon.